Hi, my name is Tommy Botkins, and I'm on the safety team here at New Life Christian Fellowship. I've been coming to this church for about 3 years now, and I was asked to kind of tell my story a little bit. And when I thought about this, I thought about like what would be one word that kind of just described where my need was with Jesus and in my life in general when Jesus started reaching out to me. And I would say that word would be belonging. Like to belong to something. I was raised by my mom in the Bay Area, without any family. My mom raised me by herself. I had half aunts and uncles and things like that. I was always like the step part of the family, and they were always very clear about letting me know that. And so I never ever had any connectedness with them. So growing up, I started struggling in school and these type of things. And when I was about 12, 13, I started getting into drugs. And then for the first time in my life, I started feeling, like I belonged somewhere, with these other people that were, I guess, broken like me or whatever, and we were all using drugs together. And then it kind of gave me that feeling of connectedness and belonging. A huge issue was when I started doing the drugs. Another thing that the drugs gave me was a sense of completeness. Like I suddenly felt complete. I felt whole as a person, where I'd been struggling in school and everything in life. I was just having a hard time managing things, and the drugs just kind of seemed to make everything right with that. And so I really started leaning on those things heavily. I also started getting in a lot of trouble. I wasn't going to school. I started getting involved in a lot of criminal activity, and it was up in the juvenile hall system. I grew up. I was in and out of jails, and by the time I was 19, I was looking at a 14-year prison sentence that I'd gotten some serious trouble. I'd taken the law into my own hands in a matter, and I behaved violently, and things got out of hand. I want to say at this moment too, not to justify what I did in any way at all. It's not what I'm trying to say, but I was raised in a violent environment, and I was kind of taught growing up that you handle things that way. And in the juvenile hall system, it was another messages that were sent to me too, and it was just kind of part of my makeup at the time. So when I went to prison, and inside of prison, I kept getting in a lot of trouble in there too. When I was in prison, I was acting out. They had to put me in lockdown situations and stuff. And it was in one of these situations, I got in a lot of trouble, and they put me in the hole for like 4 years. And they put me on this high security yard. And there was a lot of stuff going out on that yard. It was a really unstable yard. There was a lot of violence on that yard, and a lot of uncertainty, and I never really felt secure on that yard, and I saw a lot of people get hurt on that yard, and a lot of times I would be wondering, like, when is my number? When's my number coming up? And but I made it through this whole thing. It was the worst period of my life was the time I spent on that yard, but it was also a very pivotal point in my life, and a lot of conditioning happening in my mindset and who I was as a person. But another thing also happened during that time, and it was at the end of it all. At the end of it all, I got a message that I was going to be reclassified and considered to go back out into the general population, and that my time in the hole was over. And I had this like sense of relief that I got out of there. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, wow, how did I get through that? How did I get through that situation? I mean, I saw so many people get hurt, but I didn't have a scratch on my head. I was never asked to do anything while I was on that yard to get me in any more trouble, anything. And I was just sitting in there going, man, how did I get through this? And just as I was thinking that, there was a gentleman that was in the cell next to me, who was an older gentleman that like read the Bible a lot and stuff. And he had been on a protected custody yard, who normally I wouldn't talk to, but I would talk to this guy sometimes. And he goes, Tommy, reach around. I want to show you something. So I reached around and I pulled the thing in, and what it was that poem of footprints in the sand, where Jesus was talking about, in the hardest times of your life, that's when I carried you. The one set of footprints, and the guy asked, how come in the worst part of my life, there's only one set of footprints when normally there was two? Jesus said, those are the times I carried you. And it was just the timing of the whole thing, because I was just wondering, how did I get through this horrible situation? And then I get this message, and I remember sitting in my cell, like the hair on my neck felt like it was standing up. I was just like, "What? Is there a God? And did He just carry me through that? Is that what brought me through?" And it really got me thinking, and so it really got me asking questions within myself, and thinking about, what I did know, what little bit I did know about God, it had me thinking about those things a lot. Unfortunately for me at the time, I suffered from a lot of pride and ego that I had. And when I went to prison, I had made a commitment to myself that I was going to walk out the other end with my pride intact, and nobody was going to be able to take that from me. I would die to maintain it. What I never really realized at the time was like what a false pride it was. False ego, false pride that really was not serving my purpose in any good way. It's what I had. It's what I understood. And I wasn't willing to let go of it at the time for God or anybody else. But Jesus reached out to me in those moments, and I started thinking. When I got out, I didn't turn my life over to God, but He did come up in a lot of conversations. I was struggling when I got out. I wasn't able to make it on the streets, and I kept failing at everything. I'm back into drug use, falling into my own ways, not able to maintain employment. My parole agent's picking me up. I'm in and out of prison. And then there was another time when I was doing a year violation where I walked into my cell and there was a pamphlet on my bed that some Christians had left in there about receiving the Holy Spirit and helping me to change my ways. And God wanted better for me and all these things. And it was, God reaching out to me again. And so I started kind of getting into it more. I was going to church more while I was in prison. My friends kind of pulled away from me because they kind of looked at it like a weakness thing. Some did. Some were okay with it. Some were pretty iffy with it. They kind of just left me to it. But nobody really respected it. And so, but I kind of was seeking. I started seeking. And but once again, I got out and the fresh freedom air hit me, and those things left me. And and so the story goes like this. I one night I was in a bad shape. I was homeless, me and my girlfriend, and we didn't have nowhere to go. We were homeless, and I could see this cross shining on this building I'm in Hayward, California, and I'm looking across the horizon. I see this cross glowing on top of this building, and we had nowhere to go, nothing to do. And I told her the next day we're going to follow that cross and go where it is and get help. And she was like, "Dude, that's your plan? That's what you got?" And that's all I had. I had nothing else. So we went over there, we found that cross, and we actually got help there. And we got put in a shelter, a homeless shelter, but it was for people with mental health. But they let us stay there, but we ended up, using drugs, got kicked out. And but when we got kicked out of that shelter, they called over to another place called Second Chance. They sent me there, and that's where people started helping me get off of the drugs and started focusing on working on all of this. It's like God followed this cross, and God had led me to this place where people were actually trying to care about what I was going through, and they were helping me. And it made a difference to me that they reached out to me like they did, that the people actually cared about what I was going through. I still had some time that I was looking at because I was on the run from my probation. I had to go do that time. I got out. And I started, going more to church, going to meetings, and I met my wife, Tina, and I want to say in all of this too, like I talk about like belonging, back to that, it was such an important thing to me. And all of the times that I was in the despair of my drug addiction and homelessness and prisons and all of those things, I really always believed that if I had a family, if I had a good wife, if I had people like other people had that loved me and cared for me, and I had that sense of belonging, I'd be okay. And so God started bringing those people into my life. I met my wife in church, and I had prayed for a family, and her family came with her. When her family's, I have a beautiful family now, and it's through my wife. Her family has embraced me and have been very good to me. They're always there for me, and so I have that now. And Tina and I, we just celebrated 21 years of marriage. But in the time when we were getting together and we got married and stuff, I ended up catching another case for my drug use, and they were going to give me 25 to life under the 3 Strikes Act. And Tina and the church and the family and everybody got me an attorney, and they got me into treatment, and they got me out of that mess. And that was the last time that I ever used. Was that I stopped using the drugs. I started focusing more on my relationship with Jesus. When I came out of treatment, when Tina was when I came out of treatment, Tina was pregnant with my son Aaron. And I didn't know, I didn't even know that I would ever be a father. I loved the opportunity. I was very excited about being a father. And when Tina was pregnant with Aaron, it kind of like really started making me think, wow, God's really doing something in my life, because he wouldn't give me a son if he wasn't going to give me a way to provide for the son. I just believe this, right? And it turned out to be the case. You know, when Aaron was born, it was the biggest moment of my life. So if I cry, you know, that's what I'm going to do. But it was a big moment when Aaron was born. I remember holding him in my arms, this little baby, and I was like, you know, it's like I'd been trusted with something that was sacred. God had trusted me with a child, and I knew that Aaron was also God's child too, because Tina and I weren't really supposed to be able to have, because of health things, and we weren't supposed to be able to have a baby. But Aaron was born the moment, I mean, he was conceived pretty much the moment I knew that I was no longer going to be doing drugs, and that I was going to be able to have a relationship with God. I was given this child, and in that moment of, you know, God trusting me with this was really, really big for me. And it was also, it also did something else for me too, is that when I was holding that child in my hands, whatever pain and whatever hurt and whatever loss and whatever suffering that I experienced in life it had just all been made right, because I knew that being this child's father would bring more meaning and purpose into my life than anything that I ever experienced, and it has been the case. And so God gave me, you know, through Jesus, I have a beautiful wife, I have a beautiful son, I have family, I have, incidentally, I work at the place that I followed the cross to, Second Chance. I'm a counselor there, and I get to help people every day make the mostly guys getting out of prison and jails and probation, that kind of thing. I help them get off the drugs and make the transition into society. I have a very rewarding job that brings meaning and purpose into my life. And all of these things came through, you know, Jesus being patient with me, reaching out to me into the dark places that I would continuously find myself in. Jesus went into those places and kept working on my heart until he could bring me to this place where he could where I could be of some use in his kingdom, and that's what he's done.